touring with behind his new project, Chelsea Light Moving, and with a piece in the Metropolitan Museum right now. Please welcome Thurston Moore.
Thank you. Choosing one gig in New York to extol is extremely difficult. I first started going to shows here in early '76 when I was 18 years old, which makes me, I think, the third oldest person on the panel. Is that true? I'm probably right. Oh, it's hard to say. But I remember reading about the places in New York City that I wanted to go to, and I only lived like an hour and a half away in a little rural town in Connecticut at the time. And I would buy Rock Scene magazine specifically because this magazine was always quite a pictorial of what was going on in New York City at the time in rock clubs. And of course, the one club that you would always read about was Max's Kansas City on Park Avenue. So I really wanted to go there, but there's also sort of pictures of this new place called CBGB, and that sounded actually more interesting in a way. It sounded a little more sort of kind of dirty, and it had sort of less of a history in a way that sort of predated what was going on, what was being called punk rock. And so the first place I went to was Max's Kansas City, and actually the first show I saw there was the band Suicide, Alan Vega and Martin Rev, who at that time in early '76, they were in complete assault mode, and when you would go see them, Alan was invariably sort of dressed up in like an elderly woman's wig, and he had sort of scars on his face, and Martin Rev wore like these big bug-eyed glasses, and he would play like his keyboard machine at just like stunned volume and just staring at the audience. And Max's Kansas City was really tiny. It was about as tiny as this front area right here, and so there was no escape. I've already sort of told this story. There's a Thrill Jockey DVD that's out where people tell stories of their greatest gigs, and it's not specific to New York. And I told this whole Suicide story of Alan Vega crawling across the tables and sort of wrapping his microcord cable around people's throats if they didn't look at him, and he would choke them and scream in their faces, and then take their drinks and just splash their drinks in their faces, and then he would cut himself on stage, and in the middle of Frankie Teardrop, he would actually be crying on his knees, and so that was pretty wonderful. But I don't really want to talk about that. Again, I don't want to plagiarize myself. So I do want to talk about going to CBGB's for the first time, because I really wanted to go there, and I couldn't really figure out where it was. And we were driving our Volkswagen, me and my friend, the only friend I had who had any semblance of interest in this stuff. And we saw Joey Ramone walking on the street, and he was slightly inebriated. And we rolled down the windows and yelled, like, where's CBGB? And he pointed straight down Bleecker Street to Bowery, and I could see it in the distance, and I got really excited, and I said, you need a ride? And he was like, yeah, and he started coming towards our Volkswagen, and I was completely enthralled that Joey Ramone was going to get my Volkswagen, but his friend sort of took him by the arm and said, no, do not get in that car. So I went there, and we walked in, and it was like $3 to get in, which at the time was just like a lot of money at $3. CBGBs went from 3 to 5 to 6 in each increment. The more successful that place got was just like completely annoying, because it was to pay money to get in anywhere was kind of a new thing at that time for us. And so I think we didn't have the money to get in, and we just stood there at the door, and I just sort of saw all these beer signs that I had seen in these pictures in Rock Scene magazine, and I saw Richard Hell standing there, also slightly inebriated, and I asked him how I could get in, and Richard had a stamp on his hand that the door person had given him. Roberta Bailey was working the door, and he did this thing where he kind of licked his hand and tried to sort of adhere it to my hand, which was kind of such a weird teenage thing to do, but he was doing it. I was like, oh my God, this isn't going to work at all. So we went home. We didn't go, but we went back immediately because we had to. And one of the first, well, we saw a lot of stuff, but to make it short, I just wanted to sort of give you a couple of anecdotes about going there that sort of tie in with the whole sort of literary the festival scene that we're doing here. And one of them was seeing Richard Hell and the Voidoids, and the Voidoids were just great. They were like, they were just like, they were the vanguard band for me at that time. And I remember the whole, everything that was happening in the UK at the time was really exciting with the Sex Pistols and the Clash and the Damned had played there, and we saw them there. And Elvis Costello was sort of the new guy in town, and he was really exciting, and he was in the club. And the pictures we saw of Elvis Costello were him sort of dressed up as a nerd, like the high water pants and the white socks and the black buff shoes and the big glasses and total nerd rock. But he was in CBGB, and he was like looking totally badass with like ripped jeans and a leather jacket and I was like, oh wow, he actually looks kind of like a tough punk rocker. And I remember going down to the bathrooms downstairs that were legendary in CBGBs because they were just decrepit, and I was at one of the urinals, and next to me was Elvis Costello, and I was like, oh, I really like your record, and he was like, oh, thanks, mate, and then some other kid at another urinal was like, oh wow, are you Elvis Costello? Like, I really love you. And then there was some kid who was in one of the stalls, and he heard this name, and all of a sudden he was just like, is Elvis Costello out there? He's like, oh man, can you just wait a second? And I could tell Elvis was getting a little agitated by all this adulation down in this like horrible bathroom zone. And so I went upstairs and I sat with my friend. I said, dude, I just took a piss next to Elvis Costello. And he's like, no, there's no way. I said, no, he's here. I thought it was him, and it is him, and he's here. And the Voidoids came on stage, and the first song was "You Gotta Lose," which is in this incredible song. And Richard Hell jumped on stage and sang. Elvis Costello jumped on stage and sang "You Gotta Lose" with Richard Hell. The literary thing, not that Elvis Costello's not literary, is going to see Patti Smith there when Patti Smith kind of like really ruled the roost at CBGB, and it was late '76, and the place was just jammed. It was just jammed, and they used to have tables and chairs there, and there was dogs and cats, and they used to serve hamburgers there, and it was just it wasn't really conducive to that many people at the time, but there were so many people, and there's like jammed into these tables and standing up, and it was really uncomfortable, and we had just been waiting for what seemed like eternity for Patti Smith group to come out. And all of a sudden, the people who were working at CBGB came into the middle of this incredible horde of people in front of the stage and just started grabbing people, ourselves included, and just throwing us up against the wall and like creating this like space in the middle of this like crowded room, and we couldn't figure out what was going on. It was extremely violent, and they took a table and they slammed it down in the middle of all these people and threw 2 chairs into it, and they escorted William Burroughs and his assistant James Grauerholtz, and it was just ridiculous because this William Burroughs was so like beautiful, and he was elderly, and they just sat him down, and I remember Burroughs just sort of sitting there looking around at us like all these young kind of like ravenous, sweaty kids, but with no accord to sort of like how much suffering we were doing, just so he could sit there. And obviously Patti sort of said, I'm not going out until this guy has like a seat, because he's distinguished, he needs a seat, he needs a table, a candle, and then Patti came out and just like really like, it's probably the best Patti Smith gig I ever saw. She just like, it was all for William. I could see she was just generating, and it was beautiful. That's my favorite. Thank you.